Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 51 Motion Echo Tower. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three primordial dimensions manifest together: time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, born from their union. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows at once: a time shadow, a space shadow, and the motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. Our architectural survey of the infinite echo is now approaching its summit. We have listened to the temporal echo tower, the universe's library of stories, the chronicle of becoming. We have gazed upon the spatial echo tower, the gallery of frozen forms, the architecture of being. Now we must bring these two together. We must follow the dimension that synthesizes narrative and form into dynamic event. We turn from listening and looking to tracking. We ask not merely how things change, nor how they are arranged, but how they travel. How do patterns carry themselves through the world? How do they navigate the relationships between here and there, between now and then? Today, we map the motion echo tower. This is where we learn that every journey is governed by an infinite chorus of inferences, and that every path is a sentence spoken by the entire field in the language of traversal. Motion is not an afterthought in this language. It is the living bridge between time and space, the way phi threads stories through geometry. To begin building an intuitive sense of this tower, imagine a vast dynamic map of rivers, roads, flight paths, and migration routes, all visible at once. At its foundation, you see a simple straight arrow, the letter V. This is the primary statement of motion. This pattern is translating in this direction at this speed. It is the ground floor of kinematic meaning, the most basic answer to the question of how something is going from one situation to another. But as you watch those arrows over time, you notice they rarely remain straight or constant. They bend, they speed up, they slow down, they spiral and loop. To understand why, you must ascend the tower. The next floor is the domain of acceleration, A. Here, arrows are no longer static. They are changing length or direction. Acceleration is the first refinement of motion, answering whether the intent of the journey is changing. Is something being pushed harder? Is it being slowed by resistance? Is it curving around an invisible center? Acceleration is the first clear sign that deeper influences are at work. It ties motion to cause, even before you name the cause as force or curvature or gradient. Climb one level higher and you encounter jerk, the change of acceleration. Jerk is the part of motion that you feel most directly in your body. A train that starts moving smoothly has low jerk. A train that lurches into motion has high jerk. Jerk tells you not only that the push is changing, but how abruptly or gently that change occurs. It gives motion its emotional quality, the difference between a graceful dance and a violent jolt. Above jerk, the tower keeps climbing through snap, crackle, pop, and beyond, through the entire infinite ladder of higher time derivatives of motion. Each new level adds finer nuance to how a trajectory is sculpted in time. These are the upper floors of what we might call the kinematic nuance tower, the part of the building that talks purely about motion in its own language, without reference to its deeper reasons. But the true motion echo tower is much greater than this central staircase. In the holophase picture, every derivative of phi, no matter how abstract it may first appear, has its own motion shadow. The motion echo tower is the complete collection of all of these shadows. It is what you see when you ask, for every aspect of the field, how does this influence the way things move? To see this, let us visit the motion echoes of derivatives that do not look kinematic at first glance. Consider curvature, a property of shape. Curvature seems purely spatial. How much a line bends, how strongly a surface arches, how spacetime itself is warped. Yet curvature dictates motion in a very direct way. A curved road forces a car to steer, producing centripetal acceleration toward the inside of the bend. The shape of the path becomes a steering command. The driver's motion is a kinematic echo of the curvature of the asphalt. At a deeper level, space-time curvature in general relativity plays this role for planets and light. In that framework, gravitational force disappears, replaced by the idea that matter curves spacetime and free particles simply follow the straightest possible paths in that curved arena. The orbit of a planet is then a motion echo of the geometry around the star. The curved shape of spacetime is written directly into the trajectory. Curvature also governs the motion of light through a lens. The curved surfaces and refractive index profile of the glass bend light rays toward the focus. Here, the spatial structure of the medium translates into a rule for how rays propagate. The lens has a fixed shape, but that static geometry gives birth to a very precise and useful motion. Shear, another spatial concept, also has a strong motion echo. In a flowing fluid, shear is a measure of how velocity changes across space. Neighboring layers move at different speeds. In that setting, the spatial derivative and the motion pattern are two sides of the same coin. In solids, shear stress can accumulate silently over long times. A rock may appear still, but its internal structure stores a twisted pattern of stress. When a fault finally slips, that stored spatial distortion is abruptly converted into motion, releasing seismic waves. Years of silent shear can end in seconds of violent movement. Topology, the shape of shape, can constrain motion even more fundamentally. Tie a simple knot in a rope, and suddenly many possible motions disappear. The rope cannot slide freely through itself. The knot's topological charge is a conserved quantity that restricts which kinematic paths are possible until the rope is cut or the knot is undone. A Mobius strip forces a traveler to flip orientation after one lap, turning a simple journey along a strip into a mind-bending experience. In crystals, line defects called dislocations carry topological information about the lattice. Under stress, these defects move, and their motion allows the bulk material to deform plastically. The large-scale reshaping of a metal bar is, at its heart, the collective motion echo of many tiny topological features. Even purely temporal quantities like omega and its time derivative alpha influence motion in subtle ways. For a wave packet, the relation between omega and the spatial wave number k determines the group velocity, the speed at which the packet's envelope travels. The derivative of omega with respect to k tells you how different frequency components separate or stay together. A carefully prepared chirp, where omega changes in time, can accelerate or decelerate a pulse in a structured way. On the other side of the same relationship, the motion of a source imprints a Doppler shift on the received frequency. Velocity alters omega. Omega patterns reveal velocity. The temporal and kinematic echoes are tightly braided. Global tallies, like energy integras and action functionals, also project into the motion echo tower. The principle of least action says that the actual path taken by a system between two states is the one that makes a certain integral quantity stationary. You can think of this as a global decision rule. Among all imaginable trajectories, the system chooses one special path. That chosen motion is the echo of the underlying tally. Similarly, Fermat's principle tells us that light selects the path that takes the least time. The straight ray in a uniform medium, the bent ray in glass, and the curved ray in a graded index fiber are all kinematic statements chosen by an optimization over time. Even phase, a seemingly abstract quantity, guides motion. In wave physics, The gradient of phase points in the direction of propagation. Phase differences drive interference, and phase gradients drive flows. In quantum mechanics, the phase of the wave function plays a similar role. In some interpretations, like pilot wave theory, the velocity of a particle is directly linked to the gradient of the phase of an underlying guiding wave. The particle's path is then literally a motion echo of a phase field. Stepping back, we can now see the semantic meaning of the motion echo tower. If the temporal tower is the dimension of unfolding stories, and the spatial tower is the dimension of frozen form, then the motion tower is the dimension of dynamic relationship. It tells us how one event reaches another, how one place communicates with another, how one configuration transforms into the next. In the language analogy, the motion tower contains the verbs and adverbs that describe traversal and navigation. Orbiting, drifting, tunneling, diffusing, flowing, marching, swirling, spiraling, converging, dispersing, homing in, and escaping. Scientifically, to explore this tower is to practice the art of tracking. It is to measure velocities, accelerations, paths, and flows, and to relay those measurements back to the deeper derivatives of the field. It turns a moving point into a window on invisible influences. When you track the motion of a comet, a bacterium, a stock price, or a person, you are reading part of the motion echo tower. The better you understand the hidden derivatives, the more you can interpret what the trajectory is telling you. Let us look more closely at some journeys, now with this lens. A comet in our solar system follows an elongated orbit around the Sun. Its instantaneous speed and direction at any point in that orbit are its local v. The changing speed as it falls toward the Sun and then climbs away is its acceleration, a. The slight shifts in the orientation of the orbit over many cycles, its precession, come from higher order influences: the gravity of other planets, the oblateness of the Sun, and relativistic corrections to spacetime curvature. The entire orbit is a motion echo of the Sun's mass, the distribution of other bodies, and the geometry of spacetime, all combined through the laws of gravitation. A soliton in an optical fiber is a different kind of traveler. It is a pulse of light that manages to keep its shape over long distances. Normally, different frequencies travel at different speeds in a medium, causing pulses to spread out. This is the dispersive motion echo of the omega k relationship. But in a nonlinear fiber, intense light slightly changes the refractive index of the medium, creating an opposing effect that tends to pull the pulse together. The soliton appears when these two tendencies exactly balance. Its steady motion is the result of a negotiated peace between dispersion and nonlinearity, two very different derivative influences meeting in kinematic harmony. Inside the crystal, a dislocation glides through the lattice under applied stress. At the macroscopic scale, you see the bar slowly bending. At the microscopic scale, the dislocation is stepping from one atomic side to the next along a preferred plane. Its motion reduces the elastic energy stored in the distorted lattice. Each step is a local rearrangement, but together they create permanent visible deformation. This is the motion echo tower operating inside matter itself, with topology, stress, and atomic interactions all feeding into the path of the defect. In your own nervous system, an action potential travels along an axon. Locally, the membrane voltage rises, peaks, and falls in a fixed temporal pattern. Spatially, that pattern moves along the fiber at a nearly constant speed. The velocity depends on the axon's diameter and its degree of myelination, physical features of its geometry. The detailed shape of the voltage spike depends on the time constants of ion channels opening and closing. Together, these spatial and temporal derivatives select a very specific motion, the stereotyped spike marching along a biological cable. In each of these cases, motion is not free. It is a distilled expression of a deeper field. Time, space, and motion are present together, but the motion echo tower lets you focus on the how of going from place to place, while still honoring the hidden reasons. When you look at the whole master tree, the motion echo tower is not a separate building standing off to the side. It is the projection of the entire tree onto the kinematic dimension. Every branch contributes some influence on motion. Some contributions are strong and obvious, others are subtle and only become important under certain conditions. The power of the holophase view is that it urges you to ask, whenever motion seems puzzling, which derivative you have not yet accounted for. You can practice reading this tower in everyday life. Watch a maple seed falling from a tree. It does not simply drop straight down. Its asymmetric winged shape forces it into autorotation. Air resistance and gravity together shape a gentle, spiraling descent. That graceful path is a visible compromise between gravitational pull, aerodynamic drag, and the curved geometry of the seed's form. You are watching spatial form, energy tallies, and environmental conditions whisper their instructions into a motion. Observe traffic on a busy road. A single car accelerates, brakes, and changes lanes based on distances, relative speeds, and intentions. But when many cars interact, emergent motion patterns appear. Traffic waves can travel backwards along a motorway, even as individual cars move forward. A small disturbance at one point can grow into a wide region of stop-and-go motion. Here, density, reaction times, and human behaviors all act as derivatives in an effective social field, and the collective motion is their echo. Track a bee as it searches a garden. Its zigzag path is not random. It blends fairly straight flights, turns triggered by scent gradients, memory of previous locations, and internal rules about how long to search in one region. At the hive, the bee converts its own journey into a waggle dance, encoding direction and distance into shared motion. The other bees then decode this moving message and transform it back into their own foraging paths. Motion is carrying information, and information is shaping motion, all within the larger holophase of the colony. If you roll a coin on its edge across a table, you can almost feel the motion echo tower unfolding in slow motion. At first, the coin rolls quickly and fairly straight. Friction and air resistance gradually steal kinetic energy, slowing it down. A tiny tilt grows more and more important, curving the path. The rolling becomes a wobbling precession, and the sound shifts as the motion changes character. Finally, the coin flops flat and spins briefly before coming to rest. This familiar little event is actually the visible interface of gravity, contact forces, friction, geometry, and energy tallies, all woven into a single trajectory. Yet, to really feel the motion echo tower, it helps to see its place inside the triunity of dimensions. Time, space, and motion are not three independent axes bolted together from the outside. In the holophase picture, they arise together as three different ways of looking at one underlying change. Time is the rhythm of that change, the sequence of before and after. Space is the pattern of that change, the arrangement of distinctions across a field. Motion is the journey traced when that rhythmic change moves those patterns through that arrangement. If you freeze motion, you are left with spatial structure. If you smear motion over long periods, you see temporal averages. If you watch motion closely, you see both the underlying geometry and the unfolding story at once. In this sense, every motion echo you observe is always carrying two more echoes along with it. A bird gliding across the sky is drawing the line in space and telling a story in time. A planet circling the star is inscribing a shape in space and repeating a rhythm in time. The motion echo tower is therefore not a separate building, but the moving bridge that continuously connects the temporal and spatial towers, carrying information back and forth between them. It is also important to recognize that motion can be stable or unstable, ordered or chaotic. A simple pendulum swinging in small arcs traces a very regular path in the motion echo tower. Its future motion is easy to predict because the underlying derivatives, like the restoring force from gravity and the small angle approximation, interact in a simple way. A double pendulum, by contrast, where one pendulum hangs from another, responds to the same gravity with a far more sensitive dependence on initial conditions. Tiny differences in the starting angle can produce wildly different future paths. Here, the same basic ingredients generate a very different style of motion echo. The tower has rooms that feel like clockwork and others that feel like storms. From a scientific point of view, the holophase approach insists on something very concrete. If a trajectory surprises you, look for the missing derivative. An effect that seems anomalous in one model often becomes natural in a richer one, where an overlooked curvature, gradient, or topological term is included. The anomalous Hall effect in certain magnetic materials is a clear example. For a long time, it looked as though electrons were developing a sideways motion for no good reason, generating a transverse voltage even when no external magnetic field was applied. Within the motion echo tower, this is a red flag. If motion is turning, some hidden structure must be doing the steering. The resolution came from quantum geometry. Electrons moving through a crystal with strong spin-orbit coupling experience an effective curvature in momentum space, called Berry curvature. This geometric quantity behaves like a magnetic field in the space of allowed momenta, bending the trajectories of electrons sideways. What looked like unexplained motion turns out to be the motion echo of a previously unrecognized derivative, a curvature living not in ordinary space, but in a more abstract space of states. The holophase lesson is that motion without explanation is usually motion without a complete list of derivatives, not motion without cause. Across nature, you can see the motion echo tower expressing itself in an enormous variety of ways. A gyroscope recessing under gravity slowly sweeps its spin axis around in a circle, a kinematic compromise between torque, angular momentum, and geometry. A photon wandering through fog follows a jagged, diffusive path as it scatters repeatedly from tiny droplets. At the macroscopic scale, we talk about a diffusion constant and penetration depth. At the microscopic scale, each scattering event is a tiny kink in the photon's path, a little clause in its motion sentence. Reaction diffusion systems show fronts of chemical change moving through space, leaving behind new colors or patterns. The speed and shape of those fronts come from an intricate balance between reaction rates in time and diffusion rates in space. Again, motion emerges as the negotiated outcome of temporal and spatial derivatives. Biology and geology provide further illustrations. Bacteria swim up nutrient gradients with a strategy called run and tumble, lengthening straight runs when conditions improve and shortening them when they worsen. In doing so, they bias a random walk into a purposeful climb up a chemical landscape. Tectonic plates creep centimeters per year across the mantle, their slow paths driven by deep convection streams of hot rock and by the pull of descending slabs. Glaciers flow like incredibly slow rivers of ice, their motion governed by gravity, temperature, and the stress and strain within the ice crystals. Over thousands of years, these motions carve valleys, move mountains of sediment, and redraw coastlines. What looks static at human timescales is revealed, under patient observation, to be another expression of the universe's love of motion. At this point in our journey, it becomes natural to ask a final grounding question. How do we know that the motion echo tower is more than a poetic way of speaking? The answer, within the Holophase program, is that it makes concrete, testable claims. It says that anytime we see motion, and especially when that motion seems surprising, we should be able to trace it back to derivatives of some underlying field or fields. If we ever found a robust, reproducible case where trajectories changed without any corresponding change in any measurable gradient, curvature, tally, or other structured quantity, the framework would be in trouble. So far, the history of science has pointed in the opposite direction. The deeper we look into puzzling motions, the more structure we tend to find. Hidden variables are replaced by hidden geometry, hidden topology, or hidden couplings. New rooms in the motion echo tower keep being discovered, particularly in regimes where quantum, relativistic, and topological effects become important. The tower expands, but the principle remains intact. Motion is an echo of structure, not an uncaused whim. In our own lives, the same pattern holds. Ideas, skills, and relationships have trajectories. They begin, accelerate, twist, and sometimes fade. When you see these paths as motion echoes of deeper structures like belief, opportunity, fear, and love, your personal journey feels written inside the same universal tower for you, here and now. By now, our survey of the three echo towers is complete. We have seen that phi's expression in time builds the temporal echo tower. Phi's expression in structure builds the spatial echo tower, and Phi's expression in journey builds the motion echo tower. None of these towers stands alone. Every real phenomenon lives at their intersection. Yet it is useful and powerful to walk through each one separately, because each reveals a different face of the same underlying field. When you keep the overall picture in your mind, the motion echo tower becomes more than a poetic metaphor. It becomes a practical discipline of attention. It reminds you that no motion is truly meaningless. Every trajectory, no matter how simple or complex, is carrying information about the deeper structure that generated it. The Holophase framework simply makes this intuition explicit and systematic. You too are a moving pattern of phi. Your heartbeat, your gestures, your decisions, your journeys across a room or across a lifetime are all motion echoes of countless underlying derivatives: physiology, memory, desire, fear, understanding, habit, and hope. To exist is to be on a path. To persist is to follow some characteristic style of motion through the many spaces you inhabit. To live is to take part, consciously or not, in the great dance of the holophase, adding your own steps to the infinite choreography. As we prepare to leave the motion echo tower and move to the final synthesis, the dimensional interweaving, let one simple invitation remain with you. Notice your own movement. Feel your breath, your pulse, the way your body shifts as you sit, stand, and walk. Watch how other beings move, from birds in the sky to people in the street to clouds in the wind. Each motion is a sentence in the universal language of phi. Each path is a story of relationships made visible. When you start to see motion this way, the world becomes not just a collection of things, but an unfolding conversation of journeys. Peace be upon you.